The champagne flute slipped from her manicured fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Crystal fragments sparkled under the chandelier lights as every conversation in the elegant ballroom stopped. 60 pairs of eyes turned toward the sound, then shifted to the small velvet box in my hands and the woman whose face had drained of all color. Is that real?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sudden silence. I smiled and closed the antique jewelry box with a soft click. "Oh, it's very real, Victoria. Just like everything else, we need to discuss tonight." The engagement party had been perfect until that moment. My son Daniel stood frozen beside his fiancée, confusion clouding his features as he looked between us. The guests, Victoria's wealthy friends, our family, and business associates, sensed the shift in atmosphere but didn't understand why the room suddenly felt electric with tension. But I understood perfectly. I'd been planning this moment for 3 months. Thanks for watching, lovelies. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. And if you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible real-life drama. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. 2 hours earlier, when I first arrived at the Riverside Country Club, the party was Victoria's idea, naturally. She insisted on the most expensive venue in town, complete with imported flowers and a 7-course dinner that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Daniel had looked uncomfortable when he mentioned the price, but Victoria dismissed his concerns with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "We only get engaged once, darling," she'd said. Well, hopefully. I should have paid more attention to that comment. I'd spent weeks preparing for this evening, but not in the way anyone expected. While Victoria obsessed over place settings and color schemes, I'd been making phone calls, reviewing documents, and having very interesting conversations with people from her past. The small jewelry box in my purse wasn't the only surprise I'd brought tonight. The party was in full swing when I made my entrance. Victoria glided over in her designer dress, a creation that probably cost more than my car payment. Her smile was practiced and perfect, the kind she'd perfected for social media photos. "Mrs. Chun," she exclaimed, air-kissing both my cheeks. "You look lovely. Though I do hope you didn't spend too much on your outfit. I know how tight things can be on a teacher's salary." The insult was wrapped in silk, delivered with such sweetness that anyone overhearing would think she was being considerate. But I caught the smirk she shared with her friend Madison, standing just close enough to witness the exchange. "Oh, I managed just fine," I replied evenly. "In fact, I brought you something special." Daniel appeared at my side, beaming as he wrapped me in a genuine hug. My son was a good man, too good perhaps. He saw the best in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it, especially when they didn't deserve it. "Mom, you didn't have to bring anything," he said. "Your presence is a gift enough." Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "How sweet. Though I suppose we should see what she brought. I'm sure it's very thoughtful." I reached into my purse and withdrew the small, worn jewelry box. It wasn't much to look at. The velvet had faded from deep blue to a dusty gray, and one corner was slightly dented from decades of careful handling. But appearances, as Victoria was about to learn, could be deceiving. "This belonged to my grandmother," I said, holding it out to her. "I thought you might like to have it." Victoria's expression shifted so quickly I almost missed it. For just a moment, disappointment and disdain flickered across her features before she remembered her audience. The smile returned, but it was strained now, not quite reaching her eyes. "How vintage," she said, taking the box with obvious reluctance. She held it away from her body as if it might contaminate her expensive dress. Madison leaned in closer, and I heard her whispered comment, "Wow, look at this cheap thing his mother got you. Is that supposed to be jewelry?" Victoria's responding giggle was like nails on a chalkboard. "Well, it's the thought that counts, right? even if the thought is clearly, I shopped at a thrift store. Several of her friends had gathered around now, drawn by the promise of drama. They exchanged meaningful looks and barely suppressed smirks. Daniel was across the room, shaking hands with his college friends, oblivious to the mockery unfolding near the gift table. But I wasn't oblivious. I was counting on it. Why don't you open it? I suggested gently. I think you'll find it quite interesting. Victoria's fingers hesitated on the latch. For a moment, something like uncertainty crossed her face. But her friends were watching, and her pride wouldn't let her back down from the performance she'd started. Of course, she said, her voice carrying across the room. Let's see what treasures we have here. The box opened with a soft creak that somehow seemed amplified in the suddenly quiet space. Victoria's intake of breath was sharp and audible. The color drained from her face as she stared down at the contents, her hands beginning to tremble. Nestled in the faded satin lining was a ring that seemed to capture and reflect every light in the room. The center stone was a flawless 3-carat emerald, surrounded by a halo of diamonds that sparkled like captured starlight. The platinum setting was intricate and clearly antique, with delicate filigree work that spoke of master craftsmanship from a bygone era. Oh my God, Madison breathed, leaning closer. Is that real? The murmur of conversation that had been building throughout the party died completely. Guests began drifting toward our corner of the room, drawn by the collective gasp and Victoria's pale, shocked expression. That has to be worth. Victoria's voice trailed off as she lifted the ring with shaking fingers. Even in the chandelier light, the emerald seemed to glow with an inner fire. Approximately $150,000, I said calmly. According to the most recent appraisal. The silence that followed was complete. Victoria stared at the ring as if it might bite her, while her friends looked on with expressions ranging from shock to envy to barely concealed hunger. Daniel had noticed the commotion and was making his way over, concern creasing his features. What's going on? Mom, what did you? He stopped short when he saw the ring, his eyes widening. Is that great-grandmother's emerald? It is indeed, I confirmed. I thought Victoria should have something beautiful for her new life. Something with history and meaning. But even as I spoke, I was watching Victoria's face carefully. The shock was genuine, but there was something else there, something that looked almost like fear. And that told me everything I needed to know about the conversation I'd had with Private Investigator 3 days earlier. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I don't know what to say. It's beautiful. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I said softly. Just like you had no idea about a lot of things. Something in my tone made her look up sharply, meeting my eyes for the first time that evening. And in that moment, I saw recognition dawn. She knew. Somehow, she knew that I knew. The antique emerald ring caught the light again as her hands trembled, but now I could see. It wasn't just surprise making her shake. It was fear. Mrs. Chun, she began, her voice careful and controlled, I really don't know how to thank you for this generous. Oh, but the evening's just getting started, I interrupted gently. In fact, I believe someone very special is about to join us. As if summoned by my words, the ballroom doors opened. Every head turned toward the entrance, where a woman in her 30s stood silhouetted against the hallway light. She was attractive in an understated way, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing a modest black dress that was clearly off the rack but well-fitted. Victoria's face went from pale to gray. The emerald ring slipped from her fingers and would have fallen to the floor if Daniel hadn't caught it with reflexes born from years of playing college baseball. Victoria, Daniel said, looking between his fiancée and the newcomer. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. The woman in the doorway began walking toward us with measured steps. Her expression was calm but determined, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. Not a ghost, I said softly. Just someone with a very interesting story to tell. If you're enjoying this wild story, and you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please smash that like button and hit subscribe, because trust me, we're just getting to the good part. The night is about to take a turn that no one saw coming. Victoria grabbed Daniel's arm, her fingernails digging into the fabric of his expensive suit jacket. We should go, she said quickly, her voice tight with panic. I'm not feeling well. I think I need some air. But Daniel was staring at the approaching woman with growing recognition. Wait. Is that Amy? Amy Rodriguez. The woman, Amy, smiled sadly as she reached our group. Hello, Daniel. It's been a while. I don't understand, Daniel said, though his voice suggested he was beginning to. Amy, what are you doing here? How did you even know about the party? Amy's gaze shifted to me, and I gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. I invited her, I said simply, because there are some things you need to know before you marry Victoria. Things that happened in Seattle 3 months ago. Victoria's grip on Daniel's arm tightened. Whatever she told you, it's lies. This woman is obsessed with me. She's been stalking me since college. But Amy just shook her head sadly. I'm not stalking you, Victoria. I'm trying to save an innocent man from making the biggest mistake of his life. The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. I could see Victoria's friends exchanging worried glances, no longer sure whose side they should be on. The night that was supposed to be Victoria's triumph was rapidly becoming something else entirely. Daniel looked confused and increasingly distressed. Mom, what is this about? Who is Amy? And why is she here? Amy, I said gently, is Victoria's wife. The words hung in the air like a physical thing. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then the eruption began. What? Daniel's voice cracked like a whip across the silent ballroom. That's impossible. Madison stepped forward, her loyalty to Victoria overriding her shock. Victoria isn't married. She's never been married. But Amy was already reaching into her small purse, withdrawing a folded document. I have the marriage certificate right here. We were married in a small ceremony in Seattle 18 months ago. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks ago, but the decree won't be final for another month. Victoria was backing away now, shaking her head frantically. This is insane. Daniel, you can't possibly believe this. Why would I marry some random woman? Because you needed my money, Amy said quietly, but her voice carried clearly across the now silent room. You were drowning in credit card debt, and your modeling career wasn't paying the bills. I was an easy target, a successful software engineer who was lonely and flattered by the attention of someone so beautiful. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Daniel's face was cycling through emotions, confusion, hurt, betrayal, and growing anger. Victoria, is this true? Of course it's not true. Victoria's voice was rising, becoming shrill. This woman is delusional. Security should have her removed. But I stepped forward, pulling my phone from my purse. Actually, I have something that might clear things up. The phone screen showed a paused video. Even from a distance, the figures were clearly recognizable. Victoria in a white dress, Amy in a navy blue suit, standing before an officiant in what was obviously a wedding ceremony. Amy sent me this yesterday, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Along with bank statements showing how Victoria systematically emptied their joint accounts before abandoning her in Seattle. Victoria lunged for the phone, but Amy stepped between us. Don't, she said firmly. You've done enough damage. This is all lies. Victoria was practically screaming now, her careful composure completely shattered. Daniel, you know me. You know I would never. Do I? Daniel's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. Because right now I'm realizing I don't know you at all. The ballroom buzzed with shocked whispers and gasps. Cell phones were appearing throughout the crowd as guests began recording the unfolding drama. Victoria seemed to realize that her carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time, broadcasted to dozens of social media accounts. Amy, I said gently, why don't you tell Daniel about the other women? Amy nodded, her expression sad but resolute. Victoria has done this before. I wasn't her first victim, and you wouldn't have been her last. She targets successful, lonely people, marries them quickly, takes what she can, and moves on. There are at least 3 others that I know of. Victoria's face had gone from pale to flushed red. You lying bitch. I should have you arrested for harassment. With what grounds? Amy asked calmly. Everything I've said is documented. The marriage certificate, the bank statements, the divorce filing, it's all public record. Daniel was staring at his fiancée as if seeing her for the first time. The urgent wedding, he said slowly. You kept pushing to move the date up. You said it was because you couldn't wait to be my wife, but she needed to be legally married to you before her divorce from Amy was finalized. I finished. It's called bigamy, and it's a federal crime. The word crime seemed to galvanize Victoria. She straightened up, her panic transforming into cold fury. Fine, she spat. You want the truth? Yes, I married her for her money. Yes, I was planning to marry Daniel before the divorce was final. So what? Do you think I'm the first person to marry for financial security? At least I'm honest about what I want. Honest. Daniel's voice was barely controlled. You've been lying to me for 8 months. Everything about us, about you, has been a lie. Not everything, Victoria said, and for a moment, something almost vulnerable flickered across her features. I do care about you, Daniel. More than I expected to. But I also need security, and you can provide that. By committing bigamy? By stealing from your current wife while planning to steal from me. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Steal? I never stole anything. Everything I took, I was legally entitled to as a spouse. Amy stepped forward. Including the $50,000 you transferred out of our account the day before you left? Money that was supposed to pay for my mother's cancer treatment. The gasp that went up from the crowd was audible. Even Victoria's most loyal friends were looking at her with horror now. That's when I knew I had to find you, Amy continued. Not for the money, I can earn more money, but because I couldn't let you do this to someone else. Especially someone as decent as Daniel. Daniel had been quiet for several long moments, processing everything he'd heard. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but final. The engagement is off. Victoria's mask slipped completely. You can't be serious. Daniel, think about what you're throwing away. We're perfect together. I can make you happy. By lying to me? By committing crimes? By using me the same way you used Amy and God knows how many others. Daniel pulled the engagement ring from his pocket, a modest but beautiful solitaire that he'd saved months to afford. I thought I knew you, Victoria. I thought I loved you. But I can't love someone who doesn't really exist. He held the ring out to her, but she didn't take it. Instead, she looked around the ballroom at the sea of shocked, disappointed, and disgusted faces. Her friends had distanced themselves, no longer willing to be associated with the scandal. The other guests were openly staring, their phones recording every moment. This isn't over, she said, her voice low and threatening. You'll regret this. All of you. No, I said quietly. The only thing we'd regret is letting you continue your pattern of destruction. Victoria turned her fury on me. You sanctimonious bitch. You think you're so superior with your little teacher's salary and your middle-class morals. You have no idea what it's like to fight for everything you have, to use every advantage you can get. You're right, I agreed. I don't know what it's like to lie and steal and manipulate people who care about me, and I'm grateful for that. For a moment, Victoria looked like she might say something else, might try one last desperate play to salvage the situation. But then she seemed to realize that she'd lost. Completely and publicly. Her shoulders sagged, and suddenly she looked smaller, older, defeated. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the ballroom doors, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted to let her pass, but no one followed her. Not even Madison, who was staring after her former friend with shock and dawning comprehension. The doors closed behind Victoria with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the sudden silence. Daniel sank into a nearby chair, still holding the engagement ring. He looked exhausted, as if he'd aged years in the space of an hour. I can't believe I was so blind, he said quietly. Amy approached hesitantly and sat in the chair beside him. You weren't blind. You were trusting. There's a difference. I should have seen the signs. The way she was always pushing for expensive things, the urgency about the wedding date, the way she talked about money. She's very good at what she does, Amy said gently. She fooled me completely, and I'm supposed to be smart about these things. She studies people, finds their weaknesses, and exploits them. You wanted to believe in love, in finding your person. There's nothing wrong with that. Daniel looked at her with something like gratitude. Thank you for coming here, for telling the truth. It couldn't have been easy. Amy smiled sadly. It wasn't. But I couldn't let her hurt someone else the way she hurt me. Especially when that someone was clearly a good person who deserved better. I felt a surge of pride watching my son handle the situation with such grace. Even in his pain and embarrassment, he was thinking about others, trying to understand rather than simply blame. The other guests were beginning to disperse, the drama apparently over. But conversations buzzed with shocked whispers and speculation. This would be the social event that people talked about for years to come. What happens now? Daniel asked. I mean, legally? She was planning to commit bigamy. Amy shrugged. I've already filed a report with the police in Seattle about the financial fraud. Whether they pursue charges for the bigamy attempt will depend on a lot of factors. Honestly, I just want my divorce finalized so I can move on with my life. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm sorry she put you through all of this. And I'm sorry I was unknowingly part of her plan to hurt you. You weren't part of anything, Amy said firmly. You were just another victim. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Did you see any of this coming? Have you ever been in a situation where someone wasn't who they seemed to be? Share your experiences below, and know that I read every single comment. Don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories like this one. 3 months have passed since that dramatic night at the Riverside Country Club. The story spread through our social circle like wildfire, and then beyond as videos of the confrontation went viral on social media. Victoria became an unwitting internet sensation, though not in the way she'd always dreamed of. Daniel threw himself into his work and his healing. He started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal and manipulation he'd experienced. Amy, surprisingly, became a friend, not romantic, just two people who'd survived the same destructive force and found understanding in shared experience. Amy's divorce was finalized 6 weeks after the party. Victoria didn't contest it, probably, because fighting it would have brought even more attention to her legal troubles. The police investigation in Seattle resulted in charges for financial fraud, though Victoria managed to avoid jail time by agreeing to pay restitution and complete community service. She left town quietly, her social media accounts deleted, her carefully constructed persona. Abandoned. Madison told me she'd heard Victoria moved to another state, presumably to start over with a new identity and new victims. Some patterns are hard to break. As for my grandmother's emerald ring, it sits in my jewelry box now, waiting for the right moment, the right person. Daniel asked me to keep it, saying he wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate its true value. Not just the monetary worth, but the history, the love. The generations of women who had worn it with honor. I'll find the right person someday, he told me. Someone real. I believe he will. The experience with Victoria, as painful as it was, taught him valuable lessons about trust, about looking beyond surface beauty, about the importance of integrity in the people we choose to love. The night of the engagement party, after all the guests had gone home and we were cleaning up the aftermath, Daniel asked me how I'd known to investigate Victoria. The answer was simple: intuition honed by 30 years of teaching. When you spend decades working with young people, you develop a sixth sense for deception. You learn to spot the difference between someone who's struggling and someone who's manipulating, between genuine emotion and calculated performance. Victoria was skilled, but she wasn't perfect. There were small inconsistencies in her stories, little moments. When her mask slipped, tiny tells that spoke of someone who was always performing. The phone call to Amy had been a shot in the dark, triggered by Victoria's casual mention of having lived in Seattle and her evasiveness about why she'd left. A simple Google search had led me to Amy's social media profile, where I saw pictures of a wedding that looked suspiciously recent. From there, it was just a matter of reaching out and asking the right questions. Trust but verify, I told Daniel that night as we loaded boxes of untouched wedding favors into my car. It's not about being suspicious of everyone you meet. It's about making sure that the person you're planning to spend your life with is who they claim to be. He nodded, understanding the distinction. I just wish I'd learned that lesson in a less public way. Sometimes the most important lessons come with an audience, I replied. And sometimes that audience needs to hear the lesson as much as we do. Looking back, I don't regret the way that night unfolded. Yes, it was dramatic and embarrassing and painful for Daniel. But it also prevented a much greater catastrophe. A bigamous marriage, financial ruin, and years of manipulation and abuse. The antique jewelry box sits on my dresser now, a reminder of that night and of the importance of looking beyond appearances. It may be worn and faded on the outside, but it contains something precious and real. Just like people, it's what's inside that truly matters. Victoria laughed at what she thought was a cheap gift from an old woman trying to impress her. But she learned too late that value isn't always visible on the surface, and that underestimating people, especially mothers protecting their children, is a dangerous mistake. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are hidden in plain sight, wrapped in faded velvet, and carried in the purse of someone who's been underestimated one too many times. The emerald ring wasn't the real surprise that night. The real surprise was discovering that truth, like that emerald, has a way of reflecting light even in the darkest moments, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win. Daniel is dating again now, taking things slowly and carefully. He's learned to value authenticity over artifice, substance over style. And when he does find the right person, she'll receive my grandmother's ring with full knowledge of its history and meaning. Because that's what real love deserves: truth, transparency, and a foundation built on something more solid than deception. The jewelry box is ready when he is. And this time, we'll all be certain that the person opening it truly deserves what's inside.